A study by the Quarterly Journal of Economics showcased that 60% of the jobs done today did not exist in the 1940s. Over a quarter of all jobs are expected to change. 44% of workers will need reskilling. Skills gaps are increasing. Most business executives don't need convincing and are quite clear that talent is critical to business transformation. 92 million jobs could be done fully remotely by 2030, up from 73 million today, which of course creates a lot of opportunities in today's labor market.
If I was to predict out 10 years from now, clearly work from home levels are going to be higher, remote work's going to be higher. Why? Because, the videos we use, the audio, companies developing massive life-size screens. I've talked to a bunch of companies looking at holograms. In the long run, if I was to predict certainly 5 years out, it would just be easier to do this. Will be big screens. 10 years, we may have a Jedi Council type thing whereby, we'll beam down.
Almost every industry now recognizes that technology is going to play a bigger role in their industry and that the role of talent is very, very important. As software becomes a bigger part of logistics or manufacturing, having access to top talent is a competitive differentiator. Every industry now is fighting for top talent. So that means you have to go where the talent is. And that's one of the forces driving a more global workforce, a more remote workforce. The second trend that's playing out is almost every company now, much earlier in their life cycle, is a multinational company. It used to be that small companies used to serve a local market first, then you got bigger and you went national, and then you went global. But now, whether it's because you're going for talent or because distribution is so accessible to people, you see even very small companies having to be more global from day one.
I'm in the Bay Area. If I want to hire a C++ coder, it's pretty easy. There are tons of them around. If I have a startup in, northern Nebraska or Hawaii, it's less obvious whether I can go hire someone, particularly very narrow specialized skills. And there's a study I'm about to put out on LinkedIn by Arpit Gupta from NYU, looking at success rates of young companies, so those less than 10 years. And he looks at millions of them across the US. And what he shows is post-pandemic, the ones that are fully remote are actually more successful in the sense that A, they're growing faster in terms of employment, and B, they're growing fast in terms of revenue and output. He puts it down primarily to they have higher hiring rates and lower quit rates. And there's now a very big sector of firms that are just starting life as fully remote and doing extremely well. The same is true for larger companies. Again, for Stanford, we have 20,000 employees. So mostly people like me are on site, but we have, roughly 10% of fully remote because it's very effective.
Today, there are companies across the spectrum that are successful. There are companies that are fully remote, that are incredibly successful. There are companies that do a hybrid, and there are companies that are primarily in the office. What I'm seeing is that the limitation tends to be actually the skill set of the CEO and the leadership team. There are leadership teams that only really know how to manage an in-office workforce, and there are other leadership teams who have learned how to manage more remotely. And that also tends to be a bit of a generational change. What we're seeing is that to be successful, whether fully remote or hybrid, you need a coherent strategy in the sense that if you're committing to be fully remote, then you need the norms, the processes around who you recruit, how you do onboarding, how you set up a culture for a fully remote company, how communication patterns happen, how you identify top performers and do promotions. A successful remote strategy is very powerful and a strong competitive advantage, but again, needs to be coherent.
There is no point bringing people in just to have them sit on Zoom. So you want to think very carefully about, honestly, it's often called return on commute, because your employees are paying for it. And that honestly is why remote companies have lower turnover rates, lower quit rates, because people vote with their feet. There's actually a fantastically famous study in 2002 in Science by one of the co-authors, Danny Kahneman, and the late Nobel Prize winner, Alan Krug and others. It evaluated what people like and dislike per hour. And the second most disliked thing was work. So, that's basically why you have to pay people to work, because they don't do it for free. But the most disliked activity per hour is commuting. People apparently hate commuting even more than they hate working. That's a very good reason not to force people into commuting unless there's some payoff to it, which means basically group activities, something like that.
ultimately companies that do this well are going to pull ahead competitively. And that's going to show up in revenue. That's going to show up in profits. That's going to show up earlier than that in, retention rates, your ability to recruit the top talent. However, I think we're going to go through this period where, unfortunately, some leadership teams are using work from home as an excuse when they perform poorly. People who are able to attract, retain, develop the best people are going to do better in the industry, and that's going to show up in the financials.
If I was trying to persuade a CEO and exec, is show them hard data and research, exactly as Francis said. One research piece, I published something in Nature 3 months ago, and we did a large randomized control trial. We took a big tech firm, 1,600 employees, and we randomized them. They have an even birthday, so you're born on the 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th of the month, you come in 5 days a week. You have an odd birthday, 1st, 3rd, 5th, you only come in 3. So it's not extreme, but you're getting an extra 2 days to work from home. We studied them for up to 2 years. We find working from home 2 days a week was not better, it was not worse. It's quieter, you save on commute, but maybe it's a bit less FaceTime, a bit less mentoring. But firstly, no performance effect. Secondly, quit rates fell by a third. That's massive. And when you talk to the firm, the typical numbers you hear is each person that quits, the estimated cost is roughly 50% of their annual salary. So this company, Trip.com, said, by cutting our quit rates by 35%, you're saving us tens of millions of dollars as a company per year. It's about business success and profitability.
Nearly every company, as I said at the beginning, is going to have to be a global company much earlier in their life to access the talent pools that they need, to create the products, to serve local markets better. And the reality is it's been complicated. It's hard. I remember when I was trying to do it, there are lots of challenges in hiring remote employees. You have to deal with local regulations. You have to create entities in countries. You have to figure out what the right pay scale is. One of the reasons I joined the Deel board is because Deel and companies like Deel address a difficult hurdle that companies face in accessing the global talent pools. All of the things I listed need to be much easier. And, leadership teams are just turning to their HR department saying, make it happen. We are going to see tools like Deel show up to make that whole thing much easier. You also need tools around, again, building the culture and making sure that you are intentional about developing people, knowing who the top performers are, promoting them and enabling them to be successful. And that's why I think we're entering a golden age of HR, that HR is going to be much more strategic.
Pre-pandemic in the US, 5% of days will work from home. Now it's about 25%. That's a 5-fold increase just in the space of the last 5 years. I think if we look out 10 years from now, we'll go from 25 to 30, 35%. It's clearly up. The technology is getting better. We are not going back to the office. The return to office movement died in early 2023. There's a little tombstone.
When we come back to meet, it'll be more about the connections between people, culture building. Our colleagues will be global in a way that we have only started to see right now. And that'll be fundamentally enabling. I think that'll create opportunities for people around the world. One of the stories that really touched me when I was looking at the Deel board was we were talking about a woman developer in Lahore, Pakistan, who is able to work for a top tech company and do it out of her house. And this is a job that, she would not have been able to do, a few years ago. And I think that'll unleash a huge amount of talent and productivity, in addition to creating opportunities for people around the world.